What's going on, Guardians? It's Tizzle here. In this video, we are going to be going over some weapons that are really set to shine in the new sandbox. Void 3.0 brought with it volatile rounds, so with Arc 3.0 right around the corner, we can assume that Arc weapons may be getting something similar. Maybe some type of chaining effect. We'll have to wait and see. With Witch Queen, exotics also got a buff to do 40% more damage to red bar enemies, meaning running an exotic primary has never been more viable. So in saying that, let's look at some exotic weapons that will be shining next season, and then I will go over some good legendary weapons as well that you also probably want to lock down. We'll just go in alphabetical order because that seems the easiest. So let us start with the former king that was such a staple to so many different types of loadouts, Anarchy. This is a raid exotic from the Scourge of the Past raid, and today it can be found in the Monument to Lost Light exotic archive. It did get hit with a nerf to its boss damage, but it still does its normal damage to high tier enemies and champions, and is great for locking down lanes where enemies spawn. It is a jack of all trades, and if we get something that increases the damage of arc weapons, this thing could come back into the limelight, despite it not being top tier for boss damage anymore. Don't sleep on this. The next weapon we have is one that I am super excited for. That is the COLDHEART exotic trace rifle. This was meta back in D2 vanilla for damage on Callus, but it hasn't really seen any use since. But in Witch Queen, trace rifles got a 40% buff to red bar enemies. I tested this weapon out while getting footage for this video, and it absolutely chews through ads. And its exotic perk, Longest Winter, allows it to do really good sustained damage as it ramps up its damage the longer you are hitting a crit. And what is even more awesome is it is now more forgiving, as in the weapons TWAB they stated the ramp time will have a bigger grace period. So you don't need perfect accuracy, and you can actually miss a crit and not be punished. And another thing they announced was that sustained damage will create an ionic trace. This is on Middle Tree Stormcaller right now, and it gives a nice boost to your ability energy. So that makes this gun even better. Conventional wisdom is that we are probably getting anti-barrier trace rifle next season, so you could pair two of these with a divinity so that you are always hitting a crit, and this thing will absolutely melt champions. Throw on special finisher and you will never have to use another weapon. Personally, I am very excited for it. Speaking of divinity, I would be remiss if I didn't give it a mention. We very well could have Season of the Trace Rifle next season, and this weapon is always good in high-end content. It's far and away the most reliable way to stun overloads, and it is a beast for boss damage phases. It is also often used in GM speedruns because of how easy it is to take down champions with this and 2 Izanagi's Burdens. It is the exotic from the Garden of Salvation raid, so if you don't have it already, you definitely want to get it before next season. Next, we have one of my personal favorites in the 4th Horseman. I used to run this a lot in nightmare hunts, and it was great. It has terrible ammo economy, but its burst DPS is simply unmatched. So if we do get a fragment or seasonal artifact mod that buffs arc weapon damage, do not sleep on this gun. It wrecks. Next, we have another slept on arc shotgun, and that is the heavy shotgun Legend of ACRIUS. This was the OG raid exotic from the Leviathan raid. It actually has a kind of AoE splash damage, so it is not bad for dealing with big groups of ads. On top of that, it has some pretty awesome damage output. It was even a meta strategy for melting the Kronosaurus raid boss after void weapons, specifically Swarm of the Raven got hit with a proxy nerf when the tractor cannon debuff got reworked. I love this gun because, like I said, I love weapons like 4th Horseman, Parasite, or Izanagi's Burden that pack a really strong punch. So Legend of ACRIUS could get stronger with Arc 3.0. Next, we have another OG D2 vanilla standout in the Prospector. Grenade launchers are in a terrible state right now and desperately need a buff. However, this is one weapon that still hits pretty hard. It has been used in boss melt DPS strategies in the past, and it may be a decent option if arc weapons are to get a buff to their damage in some way. Next up is RISKRUNNER. This weapon has always been great at what it does. It is an ad clear machine, and the damage resistance really helps for survivability. I actually used this the first time I solo flawless the Prophecy dungeon. It was an absolute monster in the cube room. I crouched on it so hard for survivability and for ad clear. So this weapon is always a good option, especially now that it does 40% extra damage to red bar enemies. And speaking of exotic primaries that hit hard, next we have SYMMETRY. I was super impressed by this weapon when I was getting footage for this video. It demolishes red bar enemies. And as you are getting crits, you are gaining stacks of dynamic charge. Once you swap to the second firing mode, this Seeking Arc projectile actually hits super hard. This alternate fire mode lasts for 10 seconds, and even at only 8 stacks, I was able to shred through a yellow bar Colossus. And at 19 stacks, it was even more impressive, hitting for over 14,000 damage per bullet. a 6.7x increase from base. It's very strong. Honestly, don't sleep on Symmetry next season. Next up, we have a weapon that a lot of people are excited for, and that is the Thunderlord. This thing was insanely strong when it launched, and then it was hit with a nerf, and we haven't really seen it since. Well, in the weapons TWAB, Bungie announced they would be giving a blanket increase to all machine gun damage. They will do 40% more damage against all PvE enemies, and 20% versus bosses. That is a massive buff. One thing to note here though is Grand Overture and Xenophage will not receive the bonus damage to bosses. And speaking of Grand Overture, it too could be really good next season. But back to Thunderlord. It will be an ad clear machine thanks to the PvE damage buff, and thanks to lightning rounds, it will be good against higher health targets as well because the fire rate increases and it generates lightning strikes. So this gun could rise back to prominence next season. Speaking of ad clear machines, Trinity GHOUL is pretty much untouched in that department. It shreds through red bars with ease and is amazing for group ad clear. So definitely get the catalyst complete for the gun next season if you haven't already, as this thing could have some awesome synergy with ARC 3.0. And that is pretty much it for the exotics to look out for next season in ARC 3.0. So next I will just talk about some good ARC options of the legendary variety. Again, I think we'll just go in alphabetical order. So from the top, we have the ARC sword from the Deepstone Crypt, BEQUESTO. I love this thing as it looks amazing, and it has some pretty good perk options as well. If you aren't much of a raider, then Hero of Ages drops from the Grasp of Avarice dungeon, Half Truths can drop from Dares of Eternity or Xur token turn-ins, and you can still get the Night Terror from the Moon. Next, we have the Darkest Before Rapid Fire Pulse Rifle from the Prophecy dungeon. This thing feels amazing and has some great perk combinations for PvE. Third Axiom would also be a good alternative for an Arc Pulse. Next, we have the weapon that I am personally the most excited about, and that is the Waveframe Grenade Launcher from the new raid, Forbearance. It can roll with Chain Reaction, which makes it an ad clear specialist. It's a super fun gun to use. You definitely want to try and lock one down for next season. The HOTHEAD is an arc rocket launcher that can be acquired from Nightfalls. It rolls with some crazy good perk combinations, and in the weapon TWABs, they stated it will be doing 10% more damage. So this is now the highest damaging rocket archetype in the game. And personally, I use this rocket launcher a ton in a lot of my builds. And lastly, we have another weapon with chain reaction, that being the old ritual weapon SALVAGER'S Salvo. This weapon has a static roll that comes with the wombo combo that Forbearance has, being Ambitious Assassin and Chain Reaction. However, you don't need RNGesus to bless you to get it. You just have to pick it up from the exotic archive, and boom, you have a god roll. I could go on and on listing other strong arc weapons, but you get the idea. Volatile rounds made void weapons top tier, so if we get a similar fragment or mod for arc weapons, their viability will just naturally go up. Anyways, that is pretty much going to be it for the video. I hope you found it informative and helpful, and if you did, then a like would be greatly appreciated. And if you want to see more helpful content in the future, then consider subscribing. I'm curious to hear from you guys what weapons you are most excited to use in ARC 3.0. Let me know down in the comments. And if you're wondering what exotic armor pieces may be strong next season, then check out the video I made on that. Needless to say, I am very excited for Stormcaller Warlock with Crown of Tempests. But that is going to do it from me. If you made it this far, then I thank you so much for watching. It's hard to believe a new season is just around the corner. I hope you are as excited as I am. Anyways, take care.